February 21st meeting of the Town of Dayton Planning Board. This meeting is going to be on video and audio and video recorded for posterity. First item is to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. First item on the agenda is to discuss or continue the public hearing for Forefront Solar at 1552 and 0 William Street.
So we have some plans for you in Mylar. My name is Susie Gifford. I'm with TRC. We're representing Forefront Power. This is Ed Schweitzer from Forefront Power. So we've been in front of you a few times now. And at this point we have, as to my knowledge, identified and responded to all comments from GZA. Peter Williams has provided us an updated letter, I think on February 9. We provided you the updated plans, and we have just kind of a bullet point list of what's been changed. And this was a culmination of both Planning Board comments and Conservation Commission comments. We went to the Conservation Commission last week, and they did approve. They provided an order, or signed the order of conditions for the NOI. So we're just here to show you the final plans and address any final comments you may have. Is there anything that you would like to see in particular? We can go over the changes since you've seen them last.
Yes, please do.
Okay. So we have, looks like most of you guys have the plans in front of you. There's a couple larger sets too that we can open up as need be. So, the same ones you are. So I have this letter. I have a few extra copies. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but it was just the cover letter that was sent with the updated plans a few weeks ago. And I think I do have some extras. Let me see. If you guys want these, there's just a few of them. These are just the bullet point list of what has changed. So I'll just go through them, and you guys can let me know if you see anything in more detail. So we've added some more details to the operation and maintenance plan, and that's on sheet C003. We have everything that's been altered since you've seen them.
Is in the cloud?
Is in a cloud,
Okay.
exactly. So we have in the middle section, there's the operation and maintenance plan. A lot of the details that we added there were very minor. It was about the frequency of mowing, and then also the cleaning solutions that will be used, which is just a vinegar and water combination. So no hazardous materials will be needed on the site. So that was added to the operation maintenance plan. Same page, we added a construction sequence, which is the next column at the top. The next few comments were from the Conservation Commission in particular. So we added some more wetland boundary lines. It was a little confusing to be able to see the wetlands, so we added some more details for them.
Same page?
That's on the actual site plans, which is C101. And then the three following pages, which are just zoomed in versions of C101. So previously on C101, this darkest line here wasn't there, and that's the actual boundary of the wetland.
C101. Oh, I'm
Just-
at point 1, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So that's C100, so if
Yep.
the 3 pages beyond that, or any of them actually, show now the boundaries more clearly, just so
Okay,
you
gotcha.
can see them. It was pretty confusing before, so we added more detail. Per one of the comments from the Conservation Commission, we were able to revisit the pole locations for the interconnection. So on that same page, or C101, a few pages down, so the interconnection is in this cloud here, in the middle of the site. So this is where we have impacts within the wetland. It's the only wetland impacts we have outside of the access road. And so the pole locations, you can see they're kind of like S's. Those are the pole locations. And previously they were very close to the wetland boundary, but we did look at the actual specs of the poles that they're going to be able to use, and we were able to expand that span. So we're further beyond that wetland boundary than where we were before. And that was one of the major comments from Conservation Commission that we were able to address.
So that's on C101.1.
Yep, it's on all versions of the C101.
I mean, the close-up.
Yes, that's right. C101. Yeah, it's kind of split across C101 and C101.2.
What is it different about these poles? Just I'm curious.
Nothing's different. We just
further apart.
Yeah, they're just further apart.
So it's a spec, you said? The spec is different? Is it
So
different type?
we actually looked at the details of what they would typically use. Usually on these drawings, we don't actually look at the individual poles. We leave that up to the actual contractors and the utilities to do that. But because we wanted to make sure that this would be physically possible, we actually looked into the types, the class of the pole, diameter, depth, and we're able to expand it from what we had originally
But it's
proposed.
still just your typical pressure-treated pole.
Exactly.
It's not green hard or
No, it's just being what you see on the side of the road. It's very typical. The next comment is we modified the vegetation management plan and the construction sequence to talk specifically about restrictions within the wetland areas. Again, this is specific to the Conservation Commission's comments. So
C003?
So there's some on C003, which is the beginning. And let me see if I can find the actual one. We added language that just said we won't go in the wetland areas unless there's stable ground conditions to make sure there's no impact ground disturbance in that wetland. So that would either be 100% dry or more likely frozen conditions. And additionally, it would just be hand clearing only, no machinery allowed within the wetland. So we have that note added in here. And then also, we have a vegetation management plan, which is one of the final pages. 602, the very last page. And you can see in the clouded area, we added these notes that clearing wetlands cannot be performed when we have unstable ground conditions, hand clearing, no machinery driven within the wetlands, and no chemicals to be used for the vegetative.
Which is the same as the earlier page.
Same thing, we just wanted to reiterate it so the contractors really saw it. In general, that's a typical thing that forefront will do is they're not using chemicals for any type of vegetation removal anyway. But that particular area is sensitive, so we wanted to make sure that that was very clear. Additional comments include, we added a cross-section detail of the access road, and that's on C102. The access road is an existing path, it's an existing car path that will be widened. And yeah, so it will be widened, and we wanted to make sure that there would not be any impacts to that wetland because it is pretty close to the existing road. So on C102, this cloud over here shows the actual cross-section of what it will look like adjacent to the wetland areas. So we'll have a 16-foot gravel road, and we've talked to the fire chief, and he said you have to have at least 20 feet of clearance, but he was fine with the 16 feet as long as we had additional clearing 2 feet beyond on each side, just so the equipment can get back and forth. So that's shown here with a 16-foot access drive with 2 feet on either side for that proper clearance.
Does your maintenance plan reference the 2-foot clearing?
Yes. And actually, we do have, so we're going to clear initially for the installation, and then we're going to put in low vegetated grasses, so that it'll prevent anything woody from growing there anyway, so maintenance will be pretty low.
Basically, on your way to cut the grass in the solar area, you'll cut the grass on either side.
Exactly. Anytime we're in there for that, we'll make sure that that's clear. The next comment was the wetland impacts table, which is actually attached to this letter. It's on the back side. And this was just to show the changes that, well, mostly the reduction of impacts from everything that we were able to accomplish with the Conservation Commission. So the impacts to the wetland areas went pretty far down from the original proposal. One of the biggest things that we changed was we had the turnaround area for the access drive was within a vernal pool buffer. So we've moved that outside of that so that the original impacts were much higher than we are seeing now. But this was just to provide them to make sure they had all the up-to-date information with the final plan set that you're looking at here. In addition to that,
Excuse me, at that meeting we had
No, okay.
as a group, I forget what day it was now, did we talk about the radius of accessibility on the curves for
Yes.
fire apparatus?
Yes.
And we corrected the radius of,
I think it's 36 feet. Yes, 36 feet. And that was requested by the fire department and the fire chief, and he sat down with us and was okay with the revised plans as is. Another major thing that we've done since we last spoke with you guys is soil test pitting. So we had an excavator go out and actually dig down to see where groundwater was. So we have those results. We had submitted those to you. And then we had gotten additional comments to fill out this Form 11 soil suitability. So we had our Massachusetts soil evaluator go out and actually conduct these. So I don't know, I think you have them already, but here's some copies of those if you guys are interested. It essentially just found that there was no risk of groundwater or wet conditions. And that was conducted under the proposed basin, which is on the western side of the property. You can see the basin on page, well, it's on a lot of them, but 102, if you still have that open. The basin's on the furthest side of the array, over here. And that's the only proposed grading on the site is in that location. Everything else is flat enough out there that we can use the current existing grade.
That's close to your property there, Frank.
It is,
Is that gonna interfere with any water coming on your property?
probably. The water comes through there today, through that gate in my backyard. I also have an easement to drain water on that property, groundwater.
So we conducted our stormwater analysis based on this new location of the basin, and we don't have any more runoff now than, or there won't be any more runoff post-construction versus pre, and that's included in the stormwater report.
So if there any stormwater or runoff after you put in the solar and damages this property, you would be responsible?
That's a good question.
I would have expectations of that. I brought that up probably 10 meetings ago. Same thing with well contamination. My well is
Yeah,
about 10 feet from that stone wall.
sure. I mean, all the calculations that we've run said that it's not an issue and not a predicted issue. So I don't know that it's.
All of our stormwater design has been reviewed and approved
Yeah.
by your town's consultants. So it's been designed to the standard that it's supposed to be designed to, and been approved.
But what if, that was the question I asked, what if he gets runoff into his property?
I think that would also be a similar concern to other neighbors, that we all have water issues as a result of, you know, being downhill from that piece.
The grade is not changing from anything that's currently existing. The basin itself is actually going to collect more runoff that's already in there than not. We don't have a lot of impervious surface, so we don't expect any of that to change. I mean, we've run the calculations and we've done it for, I think, 10 and 25-year storm.
Is that gonna hold water?
It will hold water if needed.
If needed. So it
Yeah.
could create a hazard.
It's no different than any other stormwater basin that you would have. It's up to Massachusetts state specifications. We follow the stormwater guide for those.
I mean, a hazard like for a child to fall into or something like that.
There is security fencing around
Yes,
it.
and
Around the actual array.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, around the basin,
Around
So that basin will be fenced in also?
yes.
I didn't know.
Okay, because, you know,
Yep,
I believe it is.
kids are gonna go in the woods,
yep. Oh, yeah, it does show that.
especially his kid.
Yeah, and the whole basin, I believe, is 2, 4, 6 feet deep. So it goes from 139.5 to 145.5. But yes, you're right, there is fencing shown in this as well. And then there's also fencing around the array itself. So there'll be double protection for that particular area.
And any water discharging from that basin is actually discharging down gradient from,
Gonna be going away from the property.
yes.
To the Coles River.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to be clear, you know, if it does come on his property and no one still answered my question, who's responsible?
I mean, if it's like.
Will it be
it's a-
your solar company or will it be the Arujo family?
If it's a pre-existing problem, that isn't really
I
something.
don't believe it's pre-existing.
But he did say there currently is
We
runoff.
had one year when we had that terrible rains, it washed right through the property into my pool,
Absolutely, and that, I'm just,
There won't be any change to the pre and post runoff conditions as a result of the solar array, as a result of the way it's designed and the stormwater facilities that we proposed.
Okay.
That's,
But if it does, who would be responsible? That's the third time I asked you this.
it's just like any landowner, neighbor issue, right? So,
Landowner.
yeah.
Okay, that's an answer.
Well,
Thank you.
I would think. I mean, and I'm sure it would come back to
Okay.
us.
I'm just curious.
No, it's a good question.
Okay.
Anything else on the stormwater basin? Over here?
Can I ask a question? Is it out of order?
Go ahead, right ahead.
Just concerns on mosquitoes
Mosquitoes?
with standing water. You know, you got Zika, West Nile, all these, you know, that's creating potentially more standing water. Is there a treatment program?
There's no treatment program. The idea is that it won't hold water unless it's needed, just for that additional runoff at the time of that storm, and it will infiltrate. It's not gonna be standing all year.
And
In the summertime, it'll be dried up.
the groundwater is quite low, it looked like, according to this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I didn't see, is there perk test results on this, or just the,
just
you
the,
didn't do an actual perk test?
yeah, we did just the groundwater location, and then the soil evaluation.
The lower soils are more sands and, you know, fine
Yeah, right,
sands and
right.
silts with cobble, so it's gonna drain down,
It's gonna drain down very quickly,
yes.
what I would expect.
Yeah, and it might pool during the storm, and maybe, depends on how bad the storm will be, but it's not gonna sit there.
Excuse me, Peter Bambi.
Yes.
Peter Williams, do you have any final comments?
Was that the last comment on the letter?
Just one more, I've actually already said it, but just to note that we originally were proposing slight grade along the access road, but we are not anymore. We're able to use the existing grade, which will reduce, a lot more of the soil and erosion.
That is the second to last bullet point.
Yep, and then there's a Knox box added for, fire chief wanted to make sure that we had a Knox box and a plan for emergency services to be able to access the property if needed. So we've talked to him, there's a detail on one of the final detail maps. probably 6:05:02.
502?
5:02.
It's getting good.
And in talking with the fire chief, we made sure we had said that we will let you guys know if there's any change of emergency contact information. We'll alert the town to make sure everyone has the most up-to-date information. And they would, of course, have access to that Knox box, either through a key that's in there or a code.
Does the owner get a key?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can always find him.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that he's gonna have to maintain a key to access the water tower. Doesn't the fence go outside?
No, the fence is beyond the water tower.
The fence is out here.
Yeah. And it's actually just one large fence across both of the properties, so there's only gonna be one gate that will require that emergency access. So those are the changes from the last time you've seen this. Any questions or anything else you want us to?
Anything to add, Peter?
No, my letter of February 9th basically is providing recommendations on potential conditions of approval, conditions if approved, and there was the one item that did request the test pit information provided on the state form, which they have complied with, which was item 4. The other items are basically recommendations for potential conditions.
3 on site plans was addressed.
Yes, it was addressed. That's correct.
So I'll read these for the public record. So these are the recommendations, section 4600 ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations, sections, number 1, section 4661, a potential approval should include a condition requiring the operator or owner to submit to the fire department the information cited in this section of the zoning bylaw and to develop with the fire and police departments an emergency response plan for securing and or shutting down the facility. Any objections to that? Number 2, a potential project approval should include a condition requiring that the 150-foot setback line shall be staked out at intervals by a professional survey and confirmed by the planning board or its representative prior to any site work. Any conditions? Okay, we already went over 3. Drainage calculations, stormwater standards.
What's that?
I just want to make sure that this was put in to provide protection for you so that,
Well, it's
before
not
they-
a 150-foot no touch, it's 130 feet no touch.
yeah, but I'm saying we established those limits before they start cutting down trees and everything, so there's no accidental that's 30 feet in closer. We're going to have a double check before they do anything out there.
And number 4, we already discussed. 5. We discussed number 5? The operation and maintenance log.
Typically, that's provided as a separate document, and you can do that prior to construction.
And a potential approval should include a condition that prior to construction, the operator or owner shall submit to the planning board the information for the 24-hour emergency contact. That's on the plan right now. And number 7, a potential approval should include a condition that prior to construction, the operator or owner shall submit to the planning board a copy of the stormwater pollution prevention plan submitted to the EPA. And any other comments, questions?
Frank Christopherly, 1730 Wellington Street. Unfortunately, based on your secretarial change, I wasn't able to review the latest set of plans. A couple things that I want to make sure that are addressed. One of the prior plans had a 7-foot fence, which was not per town bylaws, required 8-foot fence. I'm also was concerned with some of the minimized planting. I understand they're moving it further in front of the property line, but I think it should be consistent with our bylaws that actually talk about opacity and the inability to see, basically a power plant, from my residence. and I'm concerned, I've heard from some of the other programs here in town, they get all approved and there's really nobody policing it. So, it's great today, tomorrow, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, somebody has to potentially look at that. So I'd be concerned with verifying the opacity of the buffer, as well as ensuring that the buffer is appropriately maintained over time.
Peter, can you comment on that? I'm looking at sheet C601, and it doesn't look like it differs to me, but I'm just comparing my memory with what I'm looking at, so I may be wrong. I understand your concerns. We're going through that with other solar locations now. It's hard to tell what's live or dead because it's wintertime. But I certainly can understand your concern.
The town bylaw actually requests opacity on a year-round basis.
That would be up to the board's decision to make that a requirement as a post-inspection, condition to verify that it does visually block the facility from the adjoining properties. You could include that as a condition.
When things go wrong, who do I call? Is that the planning board?
Yeah, we'll change the number in a couple of weeks.
I think also
I know where you live.
that you also be a condition that the applicant replenish the 53G fund, $5,000 to ensure that there's fundings for proper inspection by the board's representative.
We actually have that check here.
Well, that was the additional money, right?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, don't forget to do those, or you guys this.
I mean, there's, there's construction concerns with dust. This is a big piece, you're gonna have a skater out there, an excavator, a bulldozer, potentially dust floating in the air. Is that gonna get in my house, in my pool, on my stuff?
That was addressed in the erosion and sediment control plan that was submitted.
But I think he would talk to the building inspector who will be issuing
if
the
they're in
permits for
construction,
it,
there are
and
any
then he'll
issues,
contact the proper, town agencies to
But
go out and address it.
130 feet of undisturbed woods is going to take care of a lot of those issues, I believe.
So,
Any other questions, comments?
Sir.
So would anyone like to make a motion that we approve the site plan and give the special permit conditioned on numbers 3, numbered 1, 2, 3, no, not 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, and now 8, which would be that the landscape plan meets the zoning bylaw law regulations, and number 9, that the 53G account be replenished by $5,000 per the GZA letter dated February 9th. And I don't know who's going to make the motion, but you can take my notes if you so choose. Unless there are any other comments from anyone.
Isn't there any standard conditions we add to these permits? I'm trying to recall. Like right for access during construction, anything like that?
Including standard conditions.
What standard conditions for, that
I believe that all the standard conditions are in the plan, but.
you want them in the decision too?
Yeah, it'll be in the decision.
I make a motion to approve with all the stipulations that Peter put down.
Second.
What? There you go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain.
Okay, thank you. There is a 20-day appeal period, I believe. And we are in a bit of a quandary. I don't know how long it will take to get the special permit written up. We'll be discussing that on Friday. as part of our executive session to determine our office manager replacement.
Got it. So it just is more of an administrative.
It's more an administrative thing. And that person may need coaching, or the five of us may end up writing it up. We'll see. But
Sounds good. And then we'll, we'll file it, where it needs to be filed after 30 days.
our attorney will weigh in.
Yeah, I would suggest potentially having the attorney run a draft for you.
Yeah.
Be probably the quickest and most effective way.
Yeah, that's how we've done it in the past. Okay, thank you very much.
Do we need any signatures? I know Peter wasn't sure about the Mylar. That just
We'll keep
for you
those
guys.
when we have
Okay.
the decision in writing, then we'll sign the Mylars,
Okay.
maybe at our next meeting.
Okay.
We'll
Yeah.
probably, we'll, by our next meeting, February 7th, March 7th?
March 7th,
March
yep.
7th. I believe we should have a draft special permit in hand, and we will vote to finalize it at that time.
You don't have to attend the next meeting.
No, you don't have to
We'll
attend.
sign the Mylar and you can.
And we'll tell you when it's ready.
In touch with it whenever he's ready.
Does the planning board
Peter?
govern the conversion of this chapter 61 property?
Good night.
We have to vote on it, but that is it.
That doesn't have anything to do with this, it's through the existing owner.
Oh, right, the owner has to file that. Easy. But it's unclear in the documentation whether
Well,
the board of selectmen,
we recently had a 61A conversion request, and the Board of Selectmen had to vote on it, we had to vote on it, and then others, I don't know which other boards, but it's ultimately the Board of Selectmen, unless another board can come up with the money to buy the land. That is really what the Chapter 61A
well, they can pass the buck, so to say, that another entity
Whatever they want.
governed by the town or associated to the
If the
town.
planning board were flush with cash and wanted to buy that land, and we could vote to do that. But that not being the case, on the other hand, the Community Preservation Committee, they may have money that they dug up in a field somewhere, and maybe they could buy it.
Conservation, anybody.
So, but generally, in my experience from other towns, which is more extensive than this town regarding Chapter 61A, very few towns are in a position to buy farmland up to conserve it.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Well, wish it went a different way, but, I appreciate your attention to the matter and kind of some conditions that kind of make it a somewhat of a win-win.
It's a much better project than it could have been. And a part of that is because you were here.
Yeah,
So thank you for being here.
yeah. I hope I don't have to see it, that's all I can say
Yeah.
for the time I stay.
We could say the same.
All right, cool. Take it easy, thanks.
All right.
Take it easy, Frank.
Peter, if you want, I can take those Mylar plans, go through them, make sure that
Make
they
sure that they're
represent
different.
what the final plan should be, and bring them back.
5Gs. Let's go to Foxwood. Go.
Make it happen.
Very good idea.
Just got 8 grand from them.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to review, discuss, and act on Strawberry Fields Estates at 766 Somerset Ave. And we have,
Anybody, I think they're all outside.
I think they're outside. I'll
Okay.
follow.
Strawberry fields forever.
So let me reiterate, we are opening the public hearing for to review, discuss, and act on Strawberry Fields Estates at 766 Somerset Avenue. And here is, for the record, the notice of public hearing, Town of Dayton, Massachusetts Planning Board. You are hereby notified the Dayton Planning Board will hold public hearings on Wednesday, February 21st, 2018 at 6:30 PM on the subdivision and special permit applications by Downwind Realty Incorporated for approval of proposed conservation definitive subdivision entitled Strawberry Fields Estates, 45 lots, located at 766 Somerset Ave, North Dayton, Mass., being shown on Assessor's Map 9, lot numbers 14 and 12-1. Subdivision application pursuant to Dayton subdivision rules and regulations. Special permit applications for a conservation subdivision pursuant to section 4300 of the Dayton zoning bylaws. A conservation subdivision allows for preservation of open space by reducing required lot area and frontage. And that is the hearing notice. So, why don't you tell us about yourselves?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Christopher Agostino. I'm counsel for Downwind Inc., the proponent for this project. I'm here tonight with the project proponent, Bishop Hashem, and representatives of Jacobs Driscoll Engineering. Jacobs Driscoll's principal designer on this project, Greg Driscoll, sends his regrets. He came down with something really awful and is on fluids tonight, so he couldn't be here. But we do have two representatives that can walk you through some of the technical aspects of this proposal. But just to recap the history and how we've gotten to this point, Downwind came under control of this project site in 2017 and considered several development scenarios for this particular piece of property. As you know, Downwind is an affiliate of Stonebridge Homes, and Stonebridge has several other successful subdivisions in Dayton, knows the community, knows the market well, so tried to go through several different options as to what would work for this particular development site. The developer and its engineering team met informally with this board in August of 2017 to discuss the possibility of doing a conservation subdivision under 4300 of the zoning bylaw. And they came away from that meeting with some positive feedback. Was our understanding that a conservation subdivision is something that the town felt appropriate for this particular site as well. So with that in mind, the development team went back and engineered a project to fit the conservation subdivision bylaw and submitted an application for that in January of this year. And the developer's plans were submitted to the board, and the board's peer review consultant, GZA, who took a look at the what is at this point definitive subdivision proposal, obviously still subject to discussion and review by this board and its peer review consultant. The proposal that was submitted is for 45 traditional subdivision lots of approximately a quarter acre each, complying with all requirements as far as setbacks, and with minimal waivers from the planning board rules and regulations governing subdivision under the conservation subdivision bylaw. As you can see, the open space is dedicated to the south of the site, again complying with the percentage open space requirements under the conservation subdivision bylaw. We can go through the details of the proposal, and we're prepared this evening to answer questions that the board might have arising out of GZA's peer review. So with that said, I turn it back over to the board, and we're happy to discuss the project further and answer any questions they may have.
I think the most productive way would be for Peter to go over his review point by point, and for you to respond, or to and if we get to the point where it's obvious that there's a lot of work to be done, it might be better to continue the hearing than to discuss things that might happen in the future, just for the sake of moving things forward rather than spinning our wheels.
Well, I think the most crucial point in my mind in the review of this is that, my comment number 5, is that the conventional subdivision plan must comply with section 4251 of the subdivision rules and regulations and all the requirements, and only provide the allowable number of lots with a conventional subdivision meeting all the requirements and no waivers from the subdivision rules and regulations. In my review, I see that there would be a number of items that, do not in the conventional subdivision plan comply. And the other point that I realized is that the area used for this proposed subdivision is not the same area used for the conventional subdivision layout. So therefore, I think we're off to, we have to straighten those things out before we can really talk about the proposed conservation
Sure,
subdivision.
those are two very high-level questions, and we're prepared to discuss and answer those this evening. With respect to the first point about the as-of-right or traditional subdivision proposal that could be built on this property, the bylaw under 4300 does not say without any waivers. It says in compliance with the subdivision rules and regulations, and it says what the developer could reasonably expect to build under a traditional subdivision. And with respect to the developer's reasonable expectations, they came to a subdivision plan that was submitted under the traditional rules that showed 46 lots. And that took into account the developer's reasonable expectations based on this developer's knowledge of the town of Dayton, how they act with respect to dead-end road length, road width, some of the other, what we would consider traditional waivers from traditional subdivision control law. So the bylaw does not say with no waivers. And there's a lot of case law on dead-end roads and waivers from dead-end road length, if that's of specific concern. As a matter of fact, in the traditional, what I call the test plan in this case, there's really only one dead-end road. And it's in that back left corner of the site, and it's only about 700 to 1,000 feet in length, serving approximately 6 units or so. So it would be our reasonable expectation under traditional subdivision that the board would actually be required under some case law to grant a waiver, an affirmative waiver from that particular requirement, particularly where Dayton, and other subdivisions has dead-end roads that approach 2,000 feet in length. As a matter of fact, Country Hill Drive, which is just right next to the site, is a 2,000-foot dead end. So where the town traditionally grants waivers from that, it's entirely pursuant to the verbiage in the bylaw, the developer's reasonable expectation that it could build that plan. And if we proceeded, under the traditional rules, we could build that plan, but decided that, and with our knowledge of some of the town's needs as far as open space, that the open space layout would be the way to go. As far as the lot that is shown on the open space or the test plan and that is not shown here, it was never the developer's intent not to include that in this plan. And we're perfectly willing to apply a condition that would require us to grant that particular parcel to the town, to the Conservation Commission, to a conservation restriction, as part of this development. So it wasn't our intent to take that out of the project. It was just used for the test plan. And since nothing was proposed for it, it wasn't shown on the final subdivision plan.
Regarding the first point, we don't have our attorney present, so we'll have to confer to determine if what you're saying is true. Or as far as case law goes, I can tell you that there have been subdivisions that have been proposed before the town that have been more than 600-foot dead-end roads, and they've been denied because we did not grant that waiver. So as far as what you're saying, I can understand your position. I would make the same case if I were in your shoes, but it seems to me that until we get legal counsel, that doesn't go anywhere.
Sure, one of the cases, and obviously, we don't intend, obviously, for the board to act tonight. There's going to be further discussion, some evolution of the plan, and I'm sure the board's counsel will look at it. But the case that I was looking at specifically regarding dead-end roads and subdivision bylaws is the case of Nahezian versus Lexington. And I'm happy to share that with counsel. But again, focusing on the point that was made by GZA, the bylaw does not say without any waivers. It says, what is the developer's reasonable expectations? So that leaves a lot of room for, the developer to employ its experience in the town and for the board.
What was the chapter and verse of that?
Could I just,
Please.
section 4350 of the zoning bylaw says, the maximum number of dwelling units allowed shall be equal to the number of lots which could be reasonably be expected to be developed upon that parcel under a conventional plan in full conformance with all zoning, subdivision regulations, health regulations, wetland regulations, and other applicable requirements, period.
So full conformance means exactly the opposite of what you just said.
I would make the distinction between without waivers, which was what was originally said, and full conformance, because full conformance, if you look at the subdivision bylaw, it directly contemplates waivers. Any subdivision has waivers. There are waivers traditionally granted in all sorts of subdivisions. So full conformance with the subdivision control law contemplates waivers in certain instances where there are circumstances that the board wants to consider. All I'm suggesting at this point, and this is to the board's discretion, is that it is not under the bylaw, it does not say without any waivers. It says the words reasonable expectations, and having experience in this town and knowing other projects, the developer applied its reasonable expectations in presenting that test plan, and full conformance, you can have a subdivision in full conformance with the subdivision bylaw that includes waivers. So that's our take on
Are
it.
you saying that we should waive the stormwater management plan of a conventional subdivision, or the lot area requirements, that is number 6 and 7?
Let me just say one thing. I think that the without waivers was my wording and probably was inappropriate, and I really should have said in full compliance, so I'll take the hit on that. But this is the wording here, in here, and I think, again, I don't understand how you can say a subdivision with waivers is in full compliance with the regulations.
Agree.
And again, we'll confer with our attorney on that.
And, you know, I think the words reasonable expectations are also important from the developer's perspective, because again, we did present the plan informally to the town in August of 2017, got some feedback, and, you know, this was the development scenario for this project that kind of arose out of that. And understanding we want to dot the i's and cross the t's and make sure that we're in compliance with the bylaw, I think it's not as hard and fast as GZA, and, you know, absolutely confer with council, but there is some flexibility built into that language.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a copy of the conventional plan that you submitted at that time?
Oh, sure. And if you can't see it, and I assume, can the board see this? I
I
can
can
fold
see
it
it.
up if that.
I can see part of
is
it.
easier.
Maybe if you bring it over to that side, we could all see it better.
Actually, you know what, let me just do this here. How's that?
Here, we can just move the easel.
All right. So, and GZA can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think the two elements of what he was describing in his comments were this length of roadway, which would fit the definition of a dead-end road, both under case law and under the town's bylaw. I think the 600 foot is approximately around this area here. So we're really talking about 6 units here, 6 lots. The other aspect of it is this area is not shown on down into here. So as I mentioned, you know, there was no intent to avoid dedicating that to the town. It's just nothing was going to be done with it. So rather than you know, go through the trouble of including that in the plans and expanding it over and all the other implications, that we figured if the board wants to impose it as a condition, it certainly can.
Well, without including it on the plan that you're showing us, we don't know if it's all wetland or if it's all upland or what it is, and if it.
Well, I mean, the key is that the lot shown complies with the percentage requirements for dedicated upland to conservation area. We actually did the calculations, and, you know, just to help you in advance, there was some question about whether or not the existing open space in this easement needed to be counted, and it doesn't. But it's also going to be dedicated to open area. So we fit all the requirements for the conservation subdivision, percentages dedicated to open space, both upland and wetland, with this area here alone as shown on that plan.
Shown on sheet 3.
And the percentages, there's a table on sheet 3 that shows the percentages.
I would question why, I mean, we're probably gonna look at some revision of this plan, and assume that you should show that area. If that area is used for the conventional subdivision lot count, then it should be part of the subdivision, not just as a condition.
Is vertical.
Okay. Okay.
This doesn't
I mean,
count.
no,
That's
my name is
continuous.
Fisher
Go
Hashem,
with this.
manager
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah,
This
the
doesn't
point
count.
here is,
Continuous.
actually, I'd like to make 2 points. The first one is,
Gentlemen,
the point here is, the numbers are met, the requirements are met with the open space, upland, the open space, as it is now. Adding more, whether upland or wetlands, is only gonna increase the favorability, you know, of compliance. Number one. The point number,
that's what you should do,
we would like to do that.
should have done. We wouldn't even have to be talking about it.
Okay.
It'd already be there. It's, it just seems to me that showing us one thing and then showing us another is not on the up and up, in my opinion.
Well, I don't know how that might play into it. I think, I didn't read anything in the bylaw that would require us to. The test plan contemplates what could reasonably be expected, you know, under a scenario involving the land that we're dedicating to this project. And where we're saying that we're willing to dedicate it, I just didn't see anything. But like we said, we can add that.
And I would really like to say something. If an oversight like that gives you the image of not being on the up and up, I would really take issue with that, because I have a history here with, and you're welcome to ask any department in town and see that I've never done anything that is not on the up and up. On the contrary, everything has been more positive for the town. This is the reputation we have, and you know, I would welcome you to verify that.
I appreciate that. I just know that there are many people who don't know you as.
Sure.
And showing us one plan and then showing us another doesn't look right. And so we're starting this meeting on a bad foot.
And I guess what they're trying to say is, we'd hope you see that as just an engineering, like drawing oversight, as opposed to something we were trying to be intentional about. So when that came up as a concern, we said, oh, like, whatever the board needs to put into the agreement to make it comfortable, that's not at all supposed to be kind of like, here's one thing and there's another.
Are you opposed to doing a conventional subdivision as opposed to this one here? Do you have a reason as to why you want to do this instead of the other one? And I understand that the board did say, you know, kind of in a way, said that it was okay for a conservation subdivision. But we are just a board. The people haven't spoken, and they are the ones that the town is going to speak. And I can tell you that there was going to be a lot of opposition from the neighboring homes.
So that opposition would disappear if we go conventional?
I think it would, and a majority of it would. You know, you're still going to have some people that may still oppose it, because people do oppose things for whatever reason. But the conservation subdivision, take the homes on Country Hill Drive, they will be diminished in price by a lot. And most of the homes around the area are fairly good-sized homes and fairly high-priced homes. You put something like that next to them, and you're really taking it down to the...
Well, just if I could address that point directly, I think two things. One, the conservation subdivision calls for a 50-foot buffer, which we provide for on this plan. So there is going to be a buffer there that is going to be between the existing homes on Country Way and this one. The other point about value is these are market rate homes that if you look at the history of Bishop's developments and the price point of the houses that Bishop builds in Dayton, they're equal in value or will be comparables that will increase the value of those homes.
No.
These,
I disagree with you.
you can look at the per
100%.
square foot prices. You can look at the per square foot
It
prices.
doesn't matter. You're looking at homes from 3,000 square foot to 7,000 square foot homes there.
What price?
I don't know. I haven't sold any in there. I own one, but, you know, that's, my point is, I do not like it, I will oppose it. We have letters already from some of the neighbors that are opposed to that. Some of them already hired attorneys to represent themselves, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not even supposed to be part of the conversation.
I'm gonna go on that side. I have to recuse myself, I'm sorry.
This gentleman is recusing himself because he received a notice from, as an abutter, so apologies for that.
As a resident, I believe you can speak.
Yes, absolutely.
Can, but
And
as,
that's really, I thought that only included when it comes time to voting.
no. You-
I apologize.
Recusing has to be at the start.
Thank you for pointing that out. Just procedurally, is this a 5-person board?
There's a 5-person board.
Okay. So we need a majority of the 5-person board, which it's not a majority of the board, we need 3 out of the 4 would be voted.
Yeah, but I do believe he needs to recuse himself.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll be hearing more commentary from this
Oh,
side.
we will. Not only that, I think we're gonna need more chairs the next time around.
Yeah, I expect to hear a lot. The value of the homes on Country Hill Drive vary probably between 550 and 1 point something million. I don't think there's a house on that street less than 550. So,
Well, that's,
you know.
I mean, the houses that we're building on the 40B subdivision, not market rate subdivision, off Pine Street, are 550. Okay, and we're not having any trouble selling them.
Those are 7,000 square foot lots, right?
No,
No, they're bigger than that.
For about similar size.
Yeah.
Okay. And when I told people there, and you're welcome to verify that with the board or the neighbors, that no, we will not diminish the value of your homes, we will be increasing them, they laughed. Now they say you were right. Okay, number one. Number two, the question that was asked, okay, will you go conventional? Yeah, I'm happy to go conventional, but I mean, how is that gonna reduce the opposition? My only concern about going conventional now is it took us quite a bit of engineering effort and funds to get to this point now. To go back and start from scratch, I will have to sit down and revamp my plans and see which makes more sense to me, which may include or may not include going conventional.
My question is, didn't you have to submit, what's the word I want to use? The same thing, the same amount of lots as a conventional, you were supposed to prove to us that the same amount of lots that you would get on a conventional subdivision is when you would...
To clarify that, again, it does not, under my reading of the bylaw, and clearly, you can consult with town council on it, but it would not require a fully engineered plan, a fully engineered subdivision under the quote-unquote test plan. It talks about reasonable expectations. So I can't imagine, and I think it's consistent with other development scenarios and other, under the 40B context.
Or in the town here.
Yeah, where it's a test.
And I would agree with that. I think that's where the reasonably expected comes in, is that you're not providing detailed engineering plans, but you're complying with all the requirements of all the town regulations and providing the facilities like stormwater basins and all those things within that conventional subdivision lot plan, but not detailed engineering. I believe that.
As opposed to fully engineered plans, which we have here, which costs
I understand that.
over $50,000 more.
I understand, but I can tell you, the opposition that you're going to have, and maybe I'm speaking a little too soon, and I'm not representing from anyone, but I know the amount of calls that I've gotten from my neighbors, and that I have people that I have spoken to, they're not here today because they didn't expect this meeting to go as long as it did, as it's going, because they felt that we were just gonna say, get the whole thing to us and then we'll keep going, we'll listen to you. But since we are talking about this now, I can tell you, the opposition that you're going to have with this subdivision is gonna be unbelievable.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, I think Bisher is very experienced in town and very experienced in development generally. There is always, and I think he tried to express, there is always going to be some concern, trepidation, opposition to any development proposal, okay? As I mentioned, this developer went through several different development scenarios for this project site. It's a large project site. Under this scenario, we're respecting local bylaws as far as wetlands. We're respecting a 50-foot setback relative to the houses on Country Hill. There are a lot of benefits that come with the conservation subdivision plan that are shown on this plan.
I don't know of any, to protect the value of my property, I don't know of anything that you can say that will protect the value by doing a conservation
We
subdivision.
really haven't started the public comment period of this public hearing.
I need to speak. We need to leave, so can I just quickly speak as soon as possible?
Sure.
Okay, I live at 784 Somerset Ave. We just bought that house. It's right here, this lot.
Cummings' house? Mr. Cummings' house?
No,
Hopkins.
Hopkins.
Oh, Hoppy's, okay.
Yeah. So in turn, we have to leave, so if I could just know when the hearing's gonna be continued to, that would be good. Where can I find it? I'm new, we just moved here, so I don't know how this works.
Probably the next meeting.
The next meeting, I can find
March
that
7th.
online.
Should be
March
March
7th.
You swing by the town hall and there'll be a.
Isn't that on the
hearing
website as
notice
well?
posted. I'm not sure, but it will be posted in the town hall.
I'll make sure I find it out.
The earliest would be March 7th.
Yeah, the earliest.
Okay, and then in terms of diminishing the value of the house, I mean, there's a parking lot directly abutting our house in the corner. And we also have a road going in, and there's barely a buffer here, and I want to know about screenage and such. So those are our concerns if it's gonna happen.
There'll be plenty of time to
Okay.
discuss that further.
So March 7th. Thanks.
Thank you.
Section 4360 of the Conservation Subdivision requirement of open space. It says a minimum of 20% of the parcel shown on the development plan shall be continuous open space, excluding required yards and buffer areas. It goes on to say, not more than 25% of such open space shall be wetlands. Is that being met in this, it doesn't look like your open space is contiguous because of the roads going through a couple of areas. And then it sure looks like that the wetlands exceed 25% of the open space.
Would you like to answer that?
Absolutely.
I actually reviewed that, and it, in my opinion, it does comply.
It does
The
comply.
continuous, you can have roads splitting open space area, the bylaw specifically allows that. And it doesn't exceed the wetland, the percent of wetland,
Really? Okay.
yeah.
It may be separated by roads.
Just looks like it's.
So we don't have an answer legally. We can continue with this review. It may all be moot, I don't know.
I suggested just take some further public comments. Anything else is a concern that it can be addressed in the meantime?
Okay.
Well, just, I'd like to clarify, is the dead end road the one primary concern relative to the test plan?
Part of that, part of the detention basin lots, you know,
Was there
the different
anything
areas.
That you felt was a glaring inability to comply with the direct, because we've vetted it, you know, and we understood that there might be a concern about the dead end road, but where the reasonable expectations would anticipate a waiver there, we figured the board could have some discretion in that respect.
I think the, just the big, the big things are the no waivers and the dead-end road and the stormwater facilities, I think will knock you down a number of lots when you look at it. Unless, you yourself said you're gonna lose 6 with the dead-end, not having a dead-end road waiver. And then you're gonna lose a couple more for your detention basin lots that have to have 30 feet of frontage.
If the board doesn't feel as though it can exercise any discretion, then we might have to look at that issue, but it's.
At the same time, you have a 50-foot buffer zone that I don't know if there's a buildable area outside of the buffer zone.
We've shown that.
Oh, you have, okay.
Yeah, there it is.
Page you on that?
Those aren't buffer zones, those are backyards.
That's the buffer off the backyard of the building. And then off the front lines on that sheet as well. It's only this.
Is this is it supposed to be an undisturbed buffer zone?
No.
The
Okay,
bylaw-
I don't care.
I have to double check that one.
The bylaw says it shall be preserved to the maximum extent practical. So to the maximum extent we can preserve the buffer would be.
I see 1, 2, 3, 3 lots, 4 lots where there's no preservation and it's all disturbed area. I see a bunch of lots where the whole entire backyard is the buffer zone. I don't know that anyone would call that reasonable, although it is a big, non-definitive word, reasonable.
No, it's to the maximum extent practicable.
Preserve the natural vegetation, so then the idea would be afterwards that would return to buffer zone. It wouldn't necessarily be untouched.
And that's actually a condition.
Right.
I mean, that's something that the board could condition, so that we'd have to replant a buffer. And again, that's one of the benefits of the conservation subdivision.
Yeah, I hear you. I just wonder what prospective homeowner would want to buy a house with buffer zone growing up in, and what would keep them from cutting it down once you went away and turn it into lawn.
That's a concern that's valid, whether it's conventional subdivision, whether it's...
Oh, I understand.
Well, something's gonna go there. I assure everybody here, something's gonna go there. I guarantee you, something's gonna be built here, okay? So let's work together on building something that's as palatable, as less intrusive as possible, least intrusive as possible. But if we only, let's just assure them that we'll withdraw it now and we'll go some other way. Something's gonna go with it, guaranteed.
I don't disagree with you there. Land is valuable and legal.
Exactly, there's a lot of money there, and if people believe that just because it's gonna disturb their backyard, I'm very happy to sell it to them the property, and then they can keep it open. Otherwise, something's gonna be built.
Yeah, I understand. I would say the same thing if I were in your position.
Thank you very much. And by the way, even conventional subdivisions, I don't know what the normal setback requirement is on the normal laws, but I guarantee you it's not any more than 50, it's probably less than 50.
35.
How much?
35.
So 35 feet. So having 50 feet is not that
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Again, aside from the fact that the plans that I had didn't have
So
it.
let's talk about that. I mean, I can sense a pretty negative disposition on the part of the board, and which is fine. I mean, it's definitely a prerogative, and it's, you know, we're here to make sure we address any concerns you have. But, you know, if we're wasting time, let me know too.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I think this is a 50-foot.
You know, I think we were hoping to get some more feedback as far as the general direction we're going in. Because having left that August meeting, you know, we were under the impression that this was the direction that was probably the best use of this property to give certainty to the entire area here that's shown on this development, so that we know in perpetuity that it's going to be open space in certain areas, that you're going to have a 50-foot setback to existing houses. And, you know, again, considering that it's a large tract, there is a lot of upland, and that there are a lot of development scenarios that could be applied to this, we thought the impression was that the conservation subdivision was generally the direction that would be best to pursue. Now, I don't know whether I have that impression at this point. We can obviously maybe defer that to the next hearing when the town gets a little more guidance as to how much discretion the board has, and then, you know, we can discuss from there. But, you know, we've heard from one member that's recused himself. Is there any feedback that other members of the board might be able to give us, aside from, we understand that development is controversial, neighbors want to see undisturbed land remained undisturbed, but understanding that this parcel is, you know, a nice piece of land, good frontage, you know, available for development. What's the board's feedback as far as what direction we should go in?
Well, I'm concerned. You said that you spoke to someone in town about this, and this is the direction that they sent you. Who is they? Who did you speak with?
Back in August, they
You spoke with us,
they
but did
presented
you
the
speak with
plan.
anyone else who said maybe a conservation subdivision? Have you spoke to conservation?
We based that, we relied based on your direction, that, okay, that's good.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
This is the permit granting authority for this
Yeah.
permit. We did obtain an ORAD, so we did go to the Conservation Commission. There is an ORAD defining the wetlands, and the plan shows the, essentially, Conservation Commission's protected areas, which we've identified on the plan. And is, again, one of the benefits of the conservation subdivision, because we're able to protect those resources in perpetuity.
So have you spoken with conservation somewhat about this?
Absolutely. Not somewhat officially, we had a public hearing.
Okay, all right. Public hearing?
Yeah.
In August, we weren't against this, and I don't believe we're against it now. We just want it all to be, we want it to be fair to you, fair to the town,
Absolutely.
fair to the neighbors.
Thank you.
And that is how we will proceed from here going forward. And if the initial feedback wasn't positive, well, that's just the way it is.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to get our council here for March 7th. I'm not sure that will happen, but that's our next meeting.
But we may provide information so that you can start addressing these questions specifically.
Yes, that's the first question I'm going to ask,
Okay.
is regarding the reasonable expectation.
And the compliance with all waivers, compliance with all regulations.
Right.
I think, you know, the take I have is discretion. I think I've read enough of the cases on waivers regarding dead-end roads to say that there has to be some discretion in there based on the reasonable expectation. So if town council agrees or doesn't agree, then, you know, the board can take that advice one way or the other and go from there.
If I may, you had a prior question about any other potential concerns I had in reviewing this, is that the, on the conventional subdivision plan, you should show the wetland limits. because they can impact the number of lots you have because of the percentage of upland required for conventional lots. So that has to be taken into account. And also that you have enough space to get your roadways in, the 2 roadways in, and still complying with the Wetlands Protection Act. Those are the other things.
Any more comments from the board?
I don't like the one road, but.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna go into. I would like to see another point of ingress and egress, if at all possible. I don't even know if it's possible just by looking at this plan, but.
I know that would be the preference of the fire department, and a conventional subdivision requires it.
How about sidewalks? Sidewalks? You gonna have them on both sides of the street?
That's up to your discretion as well, whatever.
Any comments from the public at this time? Sir?
Yeah. Chris Odom, I'm at 742 Somerset Ave, and I think I agree with Mr. Rito that the conventional subdivision may receive less opposition just because of the sheer number of houses that are abutting existing homes and properties there. I know with proposed lot size of 1/4 of an acre or 1/3 of an acre, there's 5 house lots abutting my house lot. I don't think I'd have that many neighbors abutting my property if they were conventional size. So I think his statement may be true that there'll be less opposition. I haven't seen the actual conventional plan yet to see how it looks, but I mean, that was my thought when I saw this initial plan. I got a photograph copy from somebody and I was like, oh my God, how many house lots are next to my house alone, never mind all the other houses. So, I mean, right now there's 1 house next to me. There'll be 5 next to me if this plan is built that way. The house next to me is a tear down, but if somebody bought that lot and built a house on there, it'd be 1 house. I think that's a huge impact, and I have to agree that I would be less opposed if there were less houses up against my property. Again, I'd like to see the plan.
Yeah, as it is right now, excuse me, yeah. As it is right now, coming out of Country Hill Drive, there are certain days that we are there for 5-10 minutes waiting to get out of there. And this year, there's only 22 homes on that subdivision. 45 with 1 road is absolutely ridiculous. 1 way in and 1 way out. It's just. But my question to you, I guess, are you actually opposed to doing a conventional subdivision?
I'm not. But what I said to you before is, I don't, 2 points I'd like to make clear. Number 1 is, no matter what I do there, there's going to be opposition and probably violent one too. Number 2, now that we spent all that money, I'm going to be looking for alternatives that might be more lucrative than just a conventional subdivision.
Well, the money that you spent was to subdivide the property. You had to locate wetlands, you had to do all of that.
No, we're talking about the engineering. We have drainage calculations, we have detention pond size, we have a lot of engineering went into it, aside from what, that would be all thrown away now. Like road profiles, like all that would be gone.
So basically, you came before the board and you based everything on what the board said.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
doesn't
we didn't
make-
have any objection to it.
What's that?
What we said was we didn't have any objection to it. We didn't say this is the way that you should go, I don't believe.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it was an informal.
You didn't have objection to what?
We didn't have an objection to the conservation subdivision, but we didn't say this is what you need
No,
to do.
but we had to submit plans that are in compliance with
Right.
with your regulations, with the minimum data or information required. That's what we did.
But, you know, the board is here to represent the people.
Absolutely. I'm not.
And I am
I'm not
telling you that the
objecting.
people don't want the subdivision.
Well,
And that's going to be
Wait. So far, 2 or 3 people said they don't want it. So let's
Okay,
be
all right.
accurate. There's
You got a
6,000
point.
people
You
in
got a
this
point.
town.
There'll be more.
The next one will be. So,
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to continue this public hearing until March 7th.
Chairman, the proponent can't make it on March 7th, and unfortunately, I can't make it as well, so I
21st? Is that the next date?
March 21st would be a good one.
March 21st.
second it?
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That one.
March 21st.
Do we have to,
Hey, everybody grab something.
we have to go downstairs, right? So make a motion to,
Recess.
recess.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to recess to planning board office to continue the meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.